We've got a beautiful sunny day, and yes, I'm stood here in a t-shirt, so we are already into autumn. I'm here at the wonderful Lindholme Lakes, and I'm set up here on Lindholme Lake, which as you can see is a nice big open water lake. However, we've got a maximum depth here of about 12 feet, so we've got lots of water to have a go at. As you'd expect at this time of year and moving into winter, venues like this are starting to go a little bit clearer in clarity and the water temperature's getting cooler. And I'm here today to target F1s and carp, which are the fish that you would need if you were fishing a venue like this in order to win. I'm going to be fishing with a method feeder, and I'm also going to be fishing with bomb and pellet as well. Now there is a fishery pellet rule here. However, I am going to be showing you how you can just give your pellets and your bait a little bit of a boost, just to give it a little bit of an edge to make them different from everybody else's. It was cold last night, and going into winter, that's something we've got to get used to. So we're expecting it being a slow start, but we're sure that as the session progresses, it will improve. The session today is, I'm going to keep it really simple, but as with all fishing, you know, it's a starting point. So I might need to deviate, I might need to change my timings, and that's something you can only work out when you get fishing. You know, it's all having a great idea how we're going to start, but until we get fishing, we don't know what's going to happen. So my starting point is I'm going to start on a method feeder. It's an open method feeder, which I'll show you in a second, and I'm going to start short. This is a common tactic. It works on lots of open venues where your first 10 minutes, I like to literally start 5 or 6 meters out. It's amazing how many times you can pick up quick fish on that line before you start casting anywhere else in your peg. What you've got to remember is as the water gets clearer, as the temperatures and the water gets cooler, fish tend to spook much easier. And the first thing I don't want to do is cast right out there into the middle of the lake, potentially spook any fish. And even if I hook one first cast, what's going to happen? Obviously that's a great start, but I've got to play that fish all the way back through the rest of my swim. So when it is hard, when it's a slow start, that could potentially, yes, you might have a fish in the net straight away, but you could have ruined all your other lines and spooked any other fish. So I always like to err on the side of caution, start nice and short, because if I can catch anything there, all the disturbance is going to happen here. It means you've left all that area out there nice and quiet and untouched. It's a bit of a confidence thing, but it's just a really nice way of settling into your session. And whilst I'm fishing there, you can have a good look around the lake, see if anything else has been caught, and obviously if you've got to change your decision, you know you're going to know about it. You've got time to watch people. So my micro pellets are here. These have got the F1 liquid on there, and I keep these out of the sun, out of the wind, and that'll keep them in good condition. I'm starting off with just them around the feeder. I have got a combination of micro pellets and the ground bait. As you can see, as it gets harder, if you're after less and less bites, sometimes we don't know the reason why, but sometimes ground bait or a combination of ground bait and pellets can be better than just pellets on its own. And certainly if the fishing is going to be hard, by doing that, you're not feeding quite as many pellets every cast around the feeder, are you? You're just cutting off or reducing that food supply that little bit. So I've got that as an option to try, but because I'm nice and confident, I'm going to kick off with just pellets around this 20 gram. It's a 20 gram open method feeder. As you can see, it's free running, so that complies with fishery rules. And 4-inch hook length, I've got 0.16 soft steel and a size 14 carp method hook with a micro yellow wafter. Just because I'm super confident in yellow, and it's a micro wafter which will pretty much catch anything, won't it? So all I'm going to do is literally, I haven't fed anywhere in the swim yet. I'm just going to load this feeder up and drop it about 5 meters out. The first thing with that is to make sure you undo your drag. Obviously, you know, especially in winter, you might not be getting many bites, so you might be looking round, you might be checking the time, you might be chatting to the angler at the next peg. If you're going to hook a carp at 5 meters, it's easy to lose your rod. Trust me, I've seen it happen lots. So I always make sure my drag's undone. And all I'm going to do, because you've got to imagine there might be a fish just sat there, so I don't want to spook it if there is one, just going to drop that there. And the depth there is probably about 6 feet deep there, so there's a bit of depth there, and it goes that little bit deeper as you go away. So I'm going to just pop that in the rest. I've got a nice V rod rest, which is going to hold my rod in place if I do get one of those fast bites. And all I'm going to do, I'm going to set my stopwatch, and all I'm going to do, I'm going to have 2 5-minute casts. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that's how I'm going to start. So I've got a stopwatch here, and I've pressed the button, so that's now on stopwatch. Now, whilst that's there, my drag's undone, you know, I can do other things now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start loose feeding 8mm fishery pellets via catapult out there as far as I can comfortably feed, which today is probably going to be about 18-20 metres, something like that. So I've got a far bank marker, and I'm just going to fire them to there. They're 8mm pellets, so they're going to make loads of noise when they go in. We have seen a few fish crashing, because while you're setting up, while you're getting your gear ready, while you're preparing your bait, watch the lake. It's amazing how many times you'll see fish moving or crashing, and straight away, yes, it's telling you the fish are active, which is great. That doesn't mean to say they're easy to catch, but at least they're moving around, and more importantly, it's showing you where they are. You know, it's amazing how many times you'll come to a venue like this where all the fish you see are right out in the middle, or you might see some crashing close in. It can give you a great idea of where to start, and you know, it gives you confidence as well. If you see fish moving at 12 metres, for example, it's going to give you confidence that there's fish there, and we could all do with a little bit more confidence, couldn't we, in fishing? So just watch the lake. We've seen quite a few fish moving today, but they are moving everywhere, I'll be honest. We've seen some out there in the middle, but like I said, I don't want to start out there to start with. I want to see if we can pick off 1 or 2 early fish short, which would be nice, because if we do, we've still left all that area out there untouched. Now I'm going to keep a few pellets going in. I'm just going to feed 1 more time now. So this will be the 4th lot of pellets I've put in. So there's 4 columns of pellets gone in, and that's it. Now this is not like summer fishing. It's not like where I'm hoping to catch on a pellet feeder where I'll be feeding frequently. I want the fish down on the bottom. So I'm not going to feed that line too frequently. I want fish down on the bottom where A, they're usually easier to catch, but B, that's where we're going to be fishing. So if I'm not feeding too often, hopefully it's going to help keep those fish down on the bottom. But don't forget, it's not like summer fishing. You know, you might come on a lake like this and feed 20 pellets, double pouching, 2 lots to try and force the fish down. That might get the fish down, but I don't want to chuck my 1 single banded pellet on that line when there's about 60 other pellets out there, because the chances of them picking mine out is vastly reduced, isn't it? Or it could take them a lot longer to find mine. So it's just about accepting that it might be a slow start. There's no need to rush into it. On venues like this, you can put big weights together in the last hour, you know, and that's usually the best time. And don't forget, with lines like the one that I've got here right now, I'm only going to give this 10 minutes. I'll have 2 5-minute casts, and if I don't get any signs or any sign that, you know, there are fish there, or if I catch one, then I will come off it, but I won't abandon that line. You know, that is about 5 metres out. There's a good 6 feet of water there. As you probably know, this time of year and going into winter, quite often the fish won't come right into the edges because of the water clarity. The depth might not be suitable, whereas just there, you've still got 6 feet of water there, and it's just away from you that little bit. So what I will do is, when I come off this line, I will keep it alive, I will keep it primed, and I will be putting bait on that for later on. And I can drop on that line at any stage in the match. And it's amazing how many times you can catch on that line late. Ideally, you won't have to come back to it because you're going to be catching elsewhere. But it's just an option. It's almost what we class as a throwaway line. So I will be feeding that with small balls of micros. That's all I do. I like to put a ball of micros, roughly the same sort of size as the amount of pellets that's around your feeder, and I like them to hit the bottom intact, so they're not going to fall down loose over a spread. I want that ball to land intact, so when it hits the bottom, it's going to break down and look just like your method feeder, because that's ultimately what I'll be trying when I go back on that line. And I can do that by hand. You know, I don't have to feed with any bait up rods or anything like that. And if you're fishing rod only matches, like lots of fisheries do, like this one does through winter, you are allowed to feed by hand, but via catapult. So that's a great way of feeding that line in exactly the same way that you're actually going to be fishing it when you drop your feeder on it. So that's 5 minutes now. So I haven't had any indications. So all I'm going to do is have 1 more drop in on it. So we've already left some pellets down there now, obviously, because we've just had 1 cast. There's nothing telling me that those pellets have been eaten. You know, there aren't any small fish down there mopping up these pellets. So this is the second 5-minute cast. Put that in there, that drag's already undone. Set the stopwatch, and that's it. And all I'll do now is I'm going to fire a few more pellets in onto the bomb line. And the one thing with the bomb line is, it's amazing how many people go on that line really early, don't catch on it, and then they might go on the method feeder, for example, long, out into where you expect fish to be a bit more confident, and then they never come back onto that bomb line because they didn't catch on it on the first visit or the second visit. They'll just forget it, and even worse still, even stop feeding it. But trust me, you know, a bomb line like that, especially in winter, it could take 4 hours before you catch on it. But quite often that's the line where you're going to get a run of fish. So you might find you might catch one fish on this method here, one, and then nothing. And then you go long on the method, you catch one, and then you might catch nothing. You might have to go 2 or 3 meters to the right and catch one. So you're picking off fish throughout the early stages. But then if they do arrive on that bomb line, that is where you might go and get 8 in 8 casts very quickly. So that's why it's so important to, even if you haven't got much faith in it, always keep it alive. Keep some bait going in on it. And just pick your range that's comfortable for feeding. Venues like this are quite open, so the conditions can determine very much so where and how far out you can feed. And you're much better, when you've got maximum depth within pole range, more often than not, you're better off sacrificing a bit of range for accuracy. So if you'd like to fish at 25 meters, but the pellets are spreading everywhere, quite often you're probably better coming back to 22 or 20 meters, but have a nice grouping. Because if there's only 1 or 2 fish down there on those pellets, but you've got pellets spread over 2 meters, if your pellet's here, it could take them ages to find your pellet. But if you've got a nice grouping, you know, it's like a method feeder. You know, if your method feeder and your hair rig's working properly, your hook bait's right in the middle of that little ball of pellets. For a fish to come and eat them pellets, it's very, very difficult for it to avoid your hook bait, isn't it? You know, and so you're just trying to stack the odds in your favour wherever you possibly can. Well, that's the second 5-minute cast. I haven't had any indications on that, so I'm not going to waste any more time on that. Like I say, sometimes you can pick up an early fish, and quite often it can be a big fish, but I'm not going to completely abandon that line now. Obviously, I'm going to be fishing a method, I'm going to be fishing a bomb for the remainder of the session. My hands are free. It's dead easy for me to keep that line alive, so that I've just got another option, particularly for later on in the session. So all I've got is a nice ball of pellets, same sort of size as what the method feeder would be, and I want that to be intact when it hits the bottom, and all day I can keep putting a ball in just there and keep that topped up. At any stage I can obviously just drop a method feeder on that, and obviously, as we all know with margin lines, they can certainly be the places to get runs of fish later on, and it's not interfering with any of my other swims. So I'm now switched rods. Now I'm a massive believer in making casting and accuracy easier for you if you can do that, you know. Now what we actually know about this lake is that there is a sunken island out there where it's a little bit shallower, and what I did was right at the start I put a bomb on and I just went out to see if I could find it, and luckily I found it pretty much straight away, or the shallower area. I've gone back to the measuring sticks and it works out at exactly 43 meters, so that's where I'm going to be casting. Now you could cast that with a 10-foot rod, you could even do it with an 11-foot rod, depending on the type of rod that you're using. I'm a massive believer in making the job much easier, and so I'm going to use a 12-foot rod. I've been on here when the wind's got really strong, and a 12-footer has made the job much easier for you. And if the island had been further, a 12-foot rod would have allowed me to get out there. So as regards the setup, I've got a 12-foot Horizon Pro. It's a 4000 HX Pro reel, 8-pound mainline, and again I've got a free running open method feeder. Now because I'm going a bit further, this one's actually 30 gram, but it's not the largest. You know, we don't know how good or bad the fishing's going to be, so I want to err on the side of caution to start with. So it's a nice inter-size 30 gram feeder. I can always step that up if the fishing's better than what we think, and I'm going to kick off with another wafter. So I'm going to kick off on a micro again, a yellow one again, just because that's what I'm confident in. Same hook length and everything as the other rod, and that is it. So we already know that this line is actually clipped up. It's clipped up at 43 meters, but I want to hit my clip. I'm going to try and hit my clip over here for 2 reasons. One is obviously hitting the clip's going to straighten everything out. It's going to mean the feeder's going to go in nicely without potentially shredding the pellets off the feeder. I'm hitting it into the wind, so that'll make the line easier to sink. If that wind starts blowing right to left, it means I'm going to maintain a nice angle on the tip. And the other reason as well is it means I'm going to get a couple of turns of line on the reel so that if I hook a carp that wants to run, I've got a couple of turns on there before I decide I have to take the line clip off. So I'm keeping those pellets going in on that loose fed line. I've got a long stem feeder on as well, that will aid with casting. When you're casting that bit further, a longer stem feeder will help with accuracy. And like I said before, even if this line might be too far, we should be getting some sort of liners and indications on the tip. So that's something we can obviously look at if it starts happening. So I've got a far bank marker. I know where I've clipped up. I know where the shallower bit is. So all I'm going to do is get that out there, hit the clip there. So by the time I swing that tip round, I'll have got a couple of turns of line on the reel and my line will be sunk. I'm going to set the stopwatch, get that tip down. The great thing with this is that even while you're sinking your line with a method feeder, you are still fishing, because even if we get an early fish or we get an early bite, you're going to feel it. You'll feel it in the rod, in the line. That happens a lot in summer on some venues. So you don't have to sit watching the tip all the time whilst you're sinking your line. But if the line's not going to affect moving the feeder, then I'm not always mega keen on getting it to sink super quickly, as long as it's not interfering or moving the feeder. So I've set the stopwatch and that's it, I'm fishing. Now the other thing as well that I haven't talked about, and this is something that a lot of people do on different venues, it works really well on shallower venues, places like Lindholme Lakes, which are only 4 feet deep, 5 feet deep, is my loose fed line, or where I'm loose feeding the pellets, is actually banging line with my method feeder line. And the reason why I like to do that sometimes is that if fish are on my loose fed line, they can be giving themselves away with liners. You know, places like the shallower venues, shallower commercials, if fish have arrived on your loose fed pellet line, you'll be getting liners on this because your line's going right the way through. I don't always do it, and in the depths of winter I would offset lines because I wouldn't want to be retrieving this feeder back through my loose fed line. However, on a lake like this, where I'm loose feeding, it's 12 feet deep. My feeder's going to be coming across the surface by the time it gets to that line, so it's not really disturbing that line in this depth. But it's just something to think about when you're thinking about positioning your loose fed lines and your lines that are longer. So I'm going to keep those pellets going in. I'd be quite happy to leave this out there for 10 minutes certainly, just to watch the tip, see if we're getting any liners. And then every 20 minutes or so I'll put a little ball of micros in on this short line, and then we'll see how we'll go on this. I'll be happy on this having at least probably 5 or 6 casts on this, just to see if we can get a fish out there, because there may be fish out there. One thing you've got to remember is that when you're fishing out there, yes, I'm fishing 43 meters. Even if I don't catch on this, it doesn't mean to say there aren't any fish at 43 meters, because we know, because it's potentially 12 feet deep, you've got 3-4 meters of water above your feeder. So quite often, like we get in summer, there might be fish on that line, but they might be up in the water. So if I don't catch within 3 or 4 casts doing what I'm doing now, that is when I can look at hazers and things like this, different colours, different flavours that we can add to the feeder, which as soon as the feeder hits the surface, it's going to give off that cloud, and these are the things that can help draw fish down to the bottom. Because let's face it, in 12 feet of water, a lot of the time the fish are not down there naturally. They might be naturally at half depth if that's the temperature where they want to be. But that's something obviously that we can try. And the great things about using things like this, triggers as I call them, to trigger bites, is that they are, in my opinion, what I would call low risk. So in other words, if it doesn't work, you haven't ruined anything. If you're catching doing what you're doing anyway, like what I'm doing now with just pellets, then that's fine, you'll keep doing that. But if I'm not catching on that, I can add a haze to it, whatever colour, whatever flavour you're confident in, and if that doesn't work, you haven't ruined anything. It's not like you've suddenly put 2 tins of sweet corn out there. You haven't done any damage, and you're only trying it because you're not catching doing what you were doing. So it's kind of it's a low risk trick that you can do that, like I say, if it works, great, you've got your fish. If it doesn't matter. You haven't ruined your swim. Just go back to doing what you were doing. Well, we've had several casts out there now on that line clip, and these little skimmers have really taken over. I'm not getting any line bites from bigger fish. And what can happen is when you have several casts in the same spot like this, if you're fishing a lake that's got a big head of skimmers or breaming even, they can home in on the micro pellets, and sometimes they completely take over. Even if you're changing your hook baits, you know, stepping up to be more and more selective, sometimes they just take over. They home in on those pellets. And unfortunately, on lots of occasions, when I've had that before, you've either had to just come off that line or start a new line somewhere else, and then eventually they will find those pellets and take over there. And that's really what can happen, and that's certainly what's happening now. But this is why we cover our options. This is why we've got that loose fed line, because it's a completely different way of fishing, a different bait, different presentation, everything's different about it. But this line is always here for when we need it. There's nothing at this stage suggesting we should stay on this. We've been feeding that loose fed pellet line for quite a while now. We've been building it up, building it up, building it up. It's definitely time to have a look on that. But we've got a few skimmers, we've got a few skimmers in the net, but don't forget, you know, because I'm putting that down now, I'm going to have a look on the bomb line. This is always here, it is clipped up. Those skimmers out there are eventually going to clean up all those micro pellets that are out there, and when they're gone, they will go again. So at any stage I can pick this back up again in an hour and a half, and restart it again, where I can hopefully try and pick off 1 or 2 carp or F1s. So I'm going to put this down, have a look on that pellet line, and it's just shown that sometimes when those small silverfish are there, which can be a problem on lots of different venues, sometimes if you're not getting the fish that you think you should be getting, then give it a rest. Let it have a reset, let them clear up everything that's there, and then I can pick this up later on in the match if I need to. But in an ideal world, I'm going to go on that other loose fed line, and hopefully that's where we're going to catch some fish. Well, that's first cast on this line, and to be fair, it was a really slow indication. I expected just getting a bite that just zooms off, and it certainly wasn't. You could have even mistaken it for a line bite. Now normally, I've got to be absolutely honest, it's a bit of a personal thing, but I love to play fish like this with the rod down, I really do. But from past experience, you know, I like to keep my rod up when I can on venues like some of the venues like this. You know, there are snags and tree roots around lots of these established lakes, you know, and it's something to bear in mind, you know. Where it is out there, you've got open water, and it can take a little bit longer to land these fish. But, you know, on days when it's hard, you want to try and make sure you're going to land them. So if you can get the fish up, then I've always found that to be an advantage. And fish like this, I mean, this is a carp, you know, and so they're worth landing. And it's all right saying that you fished all summer and you've caught 150 pound, and you know, it's great fishing. But in winter, I've fished on this lake in particular in the depths of winter through the winter leagues, where you might need 30 pound to win the lake, and on this lake that could be 2 bites, you know. So there are big fish, and so wherever we can, especially autumn, but especially in winter when it goes really cold, just try and make sure you're going to land the fish that you're hooking. Now, I didn't get any indications before this bite. It was just an indication out of the blue. It could have been a liner, and so it's not really telling me that there's loads and loads of fish down there. But that's how it can be. Just because you're not getting indications, don't think that there aren't any there. And this had only been in there about 90 seconds. So you could argue that potentially the fish had followed the pellets down, the loose fed ones, followed it down, and that's when it's got your pellet. Whatever the reason, it doesn't matter. If it's going to result in a fish, we keep doing it, don't we? We can't always explain why things happen. But if they are working, then obviously do it. Get the fish in the net. We don't always have to understand what's happening. It's fishing. We're competing against nature. We're not always going to know the answers. And you're going to see the size of this fish, you know, and it's a big, beautiful ghosty. You know, and it's not zoomed off or anything. Let's see if we can get his head in first. There we go. Now, when I said to you that you don't need many bites on some of these venues, you know, that's the first proper fish of the day, and it didn't panic, it didn't zoom out into the middle of the lake or anything like that. So this is why it's important to just don't rush your fish, you know, in winter especially. You're not, now what I'm going to do now, because the water level is so low, just a tip for you, grab the spread block. All right, I haven't had any problems with these landing nets, but why take the chance? So because the water's so low, I've just got to get off my box and grab that spreader block. These are big fish. You don't want to go ruining and breaking your landing nets, do you? And potentially it could cost you the fish. If I lifted that out there and the net or the screw came out and the fish went in, you could lose the fish as well. So what's the point for the sake of 5 seconds? So we know that in winter, you've just seen me land that was in real time, that didn't take long at all, did it? You know, and that's because the fish at this time of year, they're starting to slow down, so they fight less, and sometimes that means you can get away with lighter tackle as well, which may result in more bites. So just bear that in mind, that big fish like this can be landed on lighter tackle in winter, and that could mean more bites if you're fishing lighter gear. Well, the very next cast, when I cast in, when I was tightening up, I had a little indication as though the line had just gone over the back of a fish. I did cast my bomb to the back edge of the feed area, so that was telling me that there might be 1 or 2 fish down there. And then I had a couple of small indications, and then all of a sudden the rod just arched over. Now this one's trying to get right underneath this bank. It's something you've always got to be careful of. Like I said, the water levels are down, and this can be an area where it's easy to lose fish. Around these tree roots, this is another good stamp fish as well. Now the water's getting clearer, you can see the fish a little bit further down. When normally in summer you won't be able to see the fish at that depth, but you can still see the fish down there, but you just don't know what's down these margins. You can see all the bushes and trees, they've obviously all got roots, and over the years branches and things could have gone in, so just try and be aware of that. This is another big fish, so you know, this is obviously one of those days where you're not getting loads and loads of bites. You know, there are times you could come on here and you'll be catching 20 F1s, you know, 2 and 3 pounders. But it's funny how there are days as it gets cooler where you might not get many bites, but the ones that you get are good stamp carp. So that's just something to bear in mind when you're settling into your session, trying to figure out what sort of a day it's going to be. It's so important with your feeding. It's, you know, we're not getting many bites, we're not getting many indications, but this is the second big carp we've had, and both fish have come in under 2 minutes. So even though it might be a slower day, it doesn't mean to say you've got to wait a long time for your fish. Sometimes these fish might be sat at half depth, if that's where they want to be. If that's the temperature where they want to stay and where they're comfortable, then they might only go down onto the bottom briefly to pick up a pellet or a couple of pellets. And obviously, if that's going to be the case, you want to try and stack the odds in the favour of your pellet getting picked out when they are down there for that short period. This is where your shorter rods can come into play, because when those fish do come up, you know, they're going to be within netting range, so obviously be ready for that. That's the only downside to using the longer rods. If you're using like a 12-footer, those fish come up that little bit further out. See, this fish has run further out now, so all I'm going to do is obviously try and turn it but I do want to try and keep it up in the water as well if I can. Like I say, this is an 0.16 hook length. In summer you might find you want 0.18. That depends on the brand that you're using, you know. I'm talking about diameters, not so much strength, but when the water does go clearer, you often find that scaling down can get you extra bites, but you've also got to be aware that if you're going to scale down and get extra bites, you still want to have a diameter on or a strength that's going to give you enough durability to land a big fish, if that's what you're going to be, you know. So it's a balancing act, but that's what, you know, we're always up against in fishing. There we go, he's up, and we've scooped him first go. So that's the first time he popped up. Because we've got a shorter rod, we're able to just scoop him. It's you know, it's something that you want to just try and make sure you're going to land all your fish. You know, pulling out a fish, getting broke by a fish, sometimes there's nothing we can do about that, you know. But like I say, about near side margins and things, it's just something to try and, you know, if you can keep a fish away from a margin when you're trying to net it, then do so. Why take the chance of letting it go down there and there may be something down there? It's just, I've seen it cost so many people fish over the last couple of winters, and they're all good fish. You know, they're not fish that you want to go back, you know. You want to make sure you're going to land them. Well, we've not had the quantity today, but we've certainly had the quality. We really hope that these tips are going to help you enjoy your fishing more this winter and hopefully help you to catch a lot more fish.